SOS received. The transmission is garbled, but the distress call is clear. They're coming. The Deathworlder fleet. They're on the move. All is lost. Anthony Jackson leaned back in his creaking chair, the low hum of Outpost 7's antiquated comm system a constant drone in his ears. Another rotation, another cycle of cosmic white noise. He ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair, the synthetic fibers of his uniform scratching against his skin. Boredom was a tangible thing out here, a heavy blanket smothering any sense of purpose. He monitored the galactic comm channels, the display a swirling mess of static and meaningless chatter. Another garbled message. Great. Just what I needed on my shift. Suddenly, a klaxon blared, jolting him upright. A priority alert flashed on the screen, bathing the cramped room in an angry red light. The static on the comm channels intensified, coalescing into a fragmented, barely intelligible signal. The speakers crackled, spitting out bursts of distorted sound. He winced, manually adjusting the frequency, trying to filter out the noise. It sounded like a dying animal, a strangled cry lost in the vastness of space. Then through the hiss and pop, a phrase cut through with chilling clarity. Deathworlder fleet. On the move. All is lost. Anthony's initial reaction was dismissal. Probably some bored cadet running drills, he muttered, reaching for his coffee. Outpost 7 was a galactic backwater, a forgotten speck on the star charts. Legitimate distress calls were about as common as a vegetarian at a Krogan barbecue. Still, the alert was hardwired to trigger on specific keywords, and Deathworlder fleet was definitely one of them. He glanced at the system logs. The SOS source originated near Ithorian space. Ithorian space. That sector was supposedly secured months ago after what had happened. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. What was going on? With a sigh, Anthony initiated a diagnostic on the comm system. The results came back clean. Functionality nominal, signal weak and distorted, origin unconfirmed. Just great. He ran a cross-reference on Deathworlder fleet with the classified military databases. The initial search results came back restricted, access denied. Red flags all over the place. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward, fingers flying across the keyboard. He'd spent enough rotations on this dust ball to know a few tricks. Bypassing a couple of security protocols, he burrowed deeper into the database. Reports began to trickle in, scattered incidents of unmatched Deathworlder aggression in neighboring systems, incursions on known Ithorian planets, whispers of entire colonies vanishing without a trace. Each report ended with the same chilling phrase, further investigation restricted. Then he noticed something else. Buried within the garbled SOS, he recognized a specific encrypted frequency, an archaic Deathworlder code his grandfather, a xenolinguist, had taught him. A frequency no one had used in centuries. With trembling fingers, he input the sequence, and a new layer of the message unlocked itself, resolving into clearer, albeit still distorted, audio. The decoded message painted a far more disturbing picture. The Deathworlders weren't attacking, they were running, fleeing from something else, something worse. The transmission cut out again, replaced by the relentless static. He could almost hear the fear in the alien voice, the desperation echoing across the light years. Entity, growing, unstoppable. Regulations prevented Jackson from reaching out to Central Command about this matter. All classified information was to be sent through proper channels. The proper channels on a base like this meant weeks of paperwork and bureaucratic delays. Weeks they probably didn't have. He was on his own. Suddenly, a new, much clearer signal began to be received, apparently from the same ship that issued the original distress call. The proximity alarms blared, even louder this time. Report. Anthony barked into the comm, his boredom replaced by a sharp surge of adrenaline. Long-range sensors detecting a small vessel rapidly approaching, sir. A voice crackled back. Matches the transponder signal of a previously identified Ithorian transport. Heavy damage, sir. Trajectory indicates an immediate intercept course with the third moon of this system. The spiraling trajectory painted on the monitor confirmed his worst fears. The Ithorian vessel was plummeting, destined for an uncontrolled crash landing on the moon's desolate surface. "Damn it," Anthony muttered, already turning from the console. He needed to move, and fast. He strode into Commander Hayes' office, the door hissing open. Hayes, a stout woman with a perpetually weary expression, looked up from her datapad. "Jackson, what is it?" "Commander, that SOS we received. The Ithorian ship is going down. We need to launch a rescue mission." Hayes sighed, rubbing her temples. "Jackson, we've been over this. Resource constraints, protocol, we can't risk valuable assets on a long shot, especially not for Ithorians." A flicker of something unpleasant crossed her face. Old prejudices, Anthony suspected. "Commander, there's a pilot down there. We can't just leave them to die. We have a directive, Jackson. Our priority is monitoring for Deathworlder activity, not running rescue ops for every stray ship that wanders into the system. The answer is no." Hayes returned to her datapad, dismissing him. Anthony felt a surge of anger, quickly suppressed. Protocol be damned. He couldn't live with himself if he did nothing. He turned and walked out, a plan forming in his mind. He'd always been better at asking forgiveness than permission. He muttered under his breath, "Someone has to do the right thing." He found Davies in the engine room, wrestling with a recalcitrant plasma conduit. "Davies, I need your help. That Ithorian ship, it's crashing. I'm going after the pilot." Davies looked up, wiping grease from his forehead. "Hayes give you the green light?" "Not exactly. Number said no. I'm going anyway. You in?" Davies grinned, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Always up for a bit of unauthorized heroism, Captain Jackson. What do you need?" Next, he found Miller in the med bay organizing supplies. "Miller, we've got a down pilot. I need you ready to go. Crash landing, potential injuries, the works." Miller, ever the pragmatist, simply nodded. "Give me 5 minutes." With Davies and Miller on board, Anthony felt a surge of adrenaline. They could do this. The shuttle bay housed a dilapidated transport shuttle, more rust than metal. Davies started rerouting power, bypassing safety protocols. "Life support shot to hell," he reported. "I can jury-rig some extra tanks, but it'll be tight." Miller gathered med packs, a portable defibrillator, and a bioscanner. "Let's hope they're still alive when we get there." Anthony, his face grim, took the pilot's seat. "All right, people, strap in. It's going to be a bumpy ride." The shuttle lurched out of the bay, its engines sputtering and coughing. Navigating through the dense asteroid field surrounding the moon was a nightmare. Rocks the size of small ships zipped past, the shuttle's shields straining under the impacts. Anthony wrestled with the controls, his fist clenched. "Shields at 60%. Davies yelled from the back. "Just hold on." Anthony replied, weaving through the debris field. He knew they were pushing the shuttle far beyond its limits. He reached for the comm panel, then hesitated. If Hayes knew what they were doing, she'd shut them down remotely. He flicked the power switch, disabling communications with Outpost 7. "No backup," he said, more to himself than the others. "Just us." The shuttle crash landed near the wreckage of the Ithorian ship. The scene was one of devastation. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and flickering emergency lights painted a grim picture. The airlock hissed open and the 3 of them stepped out, weapons drawn. "Stay sharp," Anthony commanded. "We don't know what we're walking into." They found the Ithorian ship, or what was left of it, embedded in the lunar surface. The cockpit was a mangled mess. "There," Miller shouted, pointing to a figure slumped inside. Anthony, Miller, and Davies approached cautiously. The Ithorian pilot, clearly visible through the cracked viewport, was trapped, unconscious and badly wounded. One of her 2 mouths was open, as if frozen in a silent scream. Miller scanned her with the bioscanner. "She's alive, but critical. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding. We need to get her out of here now." Davy started cutting through the wreckage with a plasma torch, the air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. The structure groaned ominously. This thing's unstable. One wrong move and it could collapse. Anthony, ignoring the danger, helped Davies pry open the mangled metal. Sparks flew, illuminating their determined faces. They worked quickly, carefully, aware that every second counted. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they managed to free the Ithorian pilot. Gently, they lifted her out of the wreckage and carried her back to the shuttle. As they approached the shuttle, a piercing alarm blared through the cockpit. Proximity alert, long-range sensors detecting a large fleet approaching. Davies yelled, his voice imbued with panic. Anthony rushed to the sensor display. The fleet's signature was unmistakable. "Deathworlders," he said, his voice grim. "It's them. The SOS was real." The shuttle lurched as it took off, heading back toward Outpost 7. Inside, Miller worked frantically to stabilize the Ithorian pilot. As they neared the outpost, the pilot's large eyes fluttered open. She looked at Anthony, her gaze filled with pain and terror. With a great effort, she whispered, her voice raspy and weak, "They're running. From something worse." Then she lost consciousness again. The shuttle docked with Outpost 7's medical bay. Anthony stared out at the approaching Deathworlder fleet, the earlier decoded message now resonating with Celeste's words. They weren't the aggressors. They were escaping something. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the sterile air of Outpost 7's medical bay. Miller, sweat beading on his brow, worked with practiced efficiency, his hands a blur as he adjusted the flow of plasma-based blood substitute into Celeste's Ithorian veins. Anthony watched from the doorway, his gut twisted with a knot of conflicting emotions. Relief that she was alive warred with the nagging fear of what he'd unleashed by disobeying orders. The door hissed open and Commander Hayes strode in, his face a thundercloud. "Jackson, my office. Now." Anthony sighed, pushing off the doorframe. "Commander, I can explain why you commandeered a shuttle and risked the lives of your team on a wild goose chase. Explain why you ignored a direct order." Hayes's voice was low but sharp, each word a carefully aimed barb. "The distress call was genuine, sir. Her ship was critically damaged. If we hadn't gone, she would have died." Anthony met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Besides," he added, gesturing toward Celeste, "she might have information that could be vital to our defense." Hayes glanced at the unconscious Ithorian, his expression hardening. "An Ithorian, after what they pulled in the Cathar system. I'm surprised you'd risk your neck for one of them." "She needed help, sir, that's all that mattered." Hayes scoffed. "Sentimentality will get you killed out here, Jackson. You're confined to quarters, and I'm filing a formal reprimand." He turned on his heel and left, the door hissing shut behind him. As if on cue, the outpost's klaxons began to blare, bathing the medical bay in a pulsating red light. "Alert! Unidentified vessels approaching," a synthesized voice announced. "Prepare for possible hostile engagement." Anthony rushed to the viewport, his blood turning to ice. Filling the void of space were colossal shapes, impossibly large warships that dwarfed Outpost 7 like a child's toy. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived. Their dark, angular designs radiated power and menace, a silent testament to their fearsome reputation. But instead of attacking, the Deathworlder ships formed a defensive perimeter around the system, their massive guns trained outward, away from the outpost. It was an unsettling display, a silent promise of unimaginable force held in reserve. A soft groan drew Anthony's attention back to the medical bed. Celeste's eyes fluttered open, her large, black pupils unfocused. "They're running," she whispered, her voice raspy and weak. Not conquering, running." Her eyes rolled back in her head and she began to convulse, her body arching against the restraints. Miller frantically adjusted the sedative drip, his face etched with concern. Fragments of images flashed through Celeste's mind. A verdant world consumed by an inky blackness, stars extinguished like candles in a storm, entire planets dissolving into nothingness. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over her, leaving her gasping for breath. As Miller worked to stabilize her, Celeste spoke again, her voice barely audible. They searched everywhere. Ancient ruins, forgotten technologies, nothing can stop it. Back in the command center, Outpost 7 went into full lockdown. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off corridors. Red lights pulsed, casting long, ominous shadows. Commander Hayes, his face grim, barked orders into the comms. Shields up, weapons systems online, prepare for immediate engagement. Anthony, ignoring his confinement, accessed the station's database, searching for any information on the Deathworlders. The reports were conflicting, contradictory. Some described them as ruthless conquerors, driven by an insatiable hunger for territory. Others hinted at a more complex history, a desperate struggle for survival against an unknown enemy. He struggled to reconcile the brutal reputation with Celeste's desperate plea. Suddenly, a series of complex, rhythmic pulses filled the comms channels. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Deathworlder fleet," Lieutenant Davies reported, his voice strained. "It's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Anthony pushed past the lieutenant, his fingers flying across the console. "Let me see that. I might be able to make sense of it." His comms expertise was the only hope they had. He began the painstaking process of isolating frequencies, filtering noise, and running decryption algorithms. Hours blurred as he worked, fueled by caffeine and a desperate hope. Finally, a breakthrough. A string of characters will-powered into a coherent sequence. It was a warning, a desperate plea for understanding. The message contained complex data, schematics, and energy signatures, all pointing to a single, terrifying conclusion. Something was coming. "I've seen these signatures before," Celeste said, her voice still weak but clearer now. She was standing behind him, leaning heavily on a medical assistant. "In the flight logs, during warp jumps. It's related to how they fold space." Before Anthony could respond, a piercing alarm shrieked through the outpost. "Warning! Massive energy spike detected on the edge of the system. Unidentified energy signature approaching." The sensor readings flooded the main display, painting a terrifying picture. The energy signature was unlike anything they had ever encountered, dwarfing even the Deathworlder fleet's power output. It was an impossible reading, a violation of known physics. Celeste cried out, her eyes wide with terror. "That's it. That's what I saw in my nightmares. It's here." A section of the Deathworlder fleet broke away from the defensive perimeter, their engines burning white-hot as they raced toward the approaching energy spike. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought overflowing with weaponry, charged head-on into the unknown. Then, in a flash of blinding light, it was gone. The dreadnought, the pride of the Deathworlder fleet, simply ceased to exist, atomized by the approaching energy. The deck bucked beneath Anthony's feet, throwing him against his console. Alarms blared, a cacophony of red strobes painting the cramped communications room in a hellish glow. Sparks showered from a damaged panel above, the acrid smell of ozone stinging his nostrils. "Damage control report." Hayes's voice boomed over the comms, tight with command. "What in God's name was that energy signature?" A tinny voice crackled back, "Commander, we've got system-wide fluctuations. Shields are down to 60%, life support is cycling. Engineering's working on it, but this spike fried half our circuits." Anthony pushed himself upright, ignoring the throbbing in his arm. He glanced towards Celeste, who was huddled in a corner, her large, mournful eyes wide with terror. She was trembling, her twin mouths muttering something unintelligible. It's hungry," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the alarms. "Always hungry." Anthony knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on one of her thick, leathery arms. "Celeste, what is it? What's happening?" He kept his voice soft, trying to cut through her panic while simultaneously keying commands into his console with his free hand. The Deathworlder message flickered on the screen, still a garbled mess of code. Outside, through the viewport, the Deathworlder fleet was in chaos. Some ships were accelerating away from the direction of the energy spike, their engines burning with an unnatural intensity. Others were maneuvering in tight defensive patterns, forming a protective screen around the larger vessels. "Sir, the Deathworlder fleet is showing erratic movement," a voice reported from the bridge. "They're all over the place." Anthony refocused on his screen. The scans were a mess, but he could see a trail of distorted space-time emanating from the point where the energy spike had originated. It was as if reality itself was unraveling in its wake. He ran a filter, isolating recurring patterns in the Deathworlder message. Mathematical sequences, spatial coordinates. It was like trying to solve a puzzle in the middle of an earthquake. "Wait," Celeste gasped, her eyes fixed on the screen. "That sequence, I know it." She pointed a trembling finger at a string of numbers. "Those are the coordinates of the old Ithorian colonies, the ones that vanished. They were consumed." Hayes's voice crackled over the comms again, tinged with frustration. "What's the status on that message, Jackson? Anything useful?" "Almost there, sir," Anthony replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Celeste is helping me decipher it, but we have another problem. The outpost sensors are going haywire. Communications are spotty." A fresh wave of alarms washed over them as another system went offline. Suddenly, a phrase drived itself on Anthony's screen, stark and chilling: "Flee or perish." "Flee or perish," Anthony repeated, his voice flat. "They understand what is coming," Celeste said, her voice regaining some of its strength. "Their technology, it is based on manipulating space-time. They can sense the distortions. Can you help me understand the message?" Anthony asked, his eyes locking with hers. "Can you help me decipher the rest?" Celeste nodded, her two mouths moving in unison. "I will try." The Deathworlders, they knew this day would come. Working together, using Celeste's knowledge of Deathworlder technology and Anthony's skill in decryption, they began to unravel the message. Soon, a crude map emerged on the screen, a predicted path of the entity's destructive advance. "It's heading towards the Gemini sector," Anthony said, his voice grim. "Densely populated, billions of lives." Hayes swore under his breath. "I can't authorize a general alert, not without more information. It would cause mass panic. We're on our own here, Jackson." Another message began to coalesce on the screen, a secondary transmission embedded within the first. It was shorter, simpler, no aggression. Beneath it was a series of complex energy shield modulation patterns. "They're signaling they don't intend to attack us," Anthony realized. "They're just trying to get out of the way." Just then, another energy spike slammed into the system, even stronger than the first. The lights flickered violently, threatening to plunge the outpost into darkness. The Deathworlder ships outside accelerated, their engines screaming. "All hands brace for impact." Hayes roared, "Prepare for the arrival of whatever that thing is." He paused. "Recalibrate shields to match the Deathworlder modulation patterns. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't." As Anthony worked frantically to adjust the shield frequencies, a cold dread washed over him. He looked at the map on the screen, at the path of destruction stretching across the galaxy, and he knew that if they didn't do something, everything was lost. And then, something shifted within him. The cynicism, the bitterness, the feeling of being trapped in a dead-end job. It all vanished, replaced by a surge of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Hayes turned to him, his face etched with worry. "Jackson," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "You've been listening to that alien, figuring out what they're trying to say. What do?" "We modulate the shields," Anthony said, the words tumbling out. "Project a no-aggression signal. A frequency, a pattern. Something that says we're not a threat." Commander Hayes turned, his face etched with skepticism. "Are you suggesting we broadcast a galactic kissing booth sign to the Deathworlders? Those signals are barely more than wishful thinking, Jackson." It's a calculated risk, Commander, Anthony countered, leaning forward. We don't know what they want, but we know they're running from something. Maybe, just maybe, a signal of non-hostility will buy us some time. Time to figure out what the hell is going on. He paused, then added, besides, with all due respect, sir, what other options do we have? Hayes stared at the main view screen at the approaching dreadnoughts. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. Damn it, Jackson, your read on this situation has been unconventional, but it's been right so far. All right, do it, but if this gets us all killed, I'm coming back to haunt you. Anthony nodded, turning to Celeste. I'm going to need your help. Specifically, your technical expertise. The signal needs to be a blend of Ithorian and, if you know it, Deathworlder tech, something they recognize. Celeste, her large eyes still wide with a mix of fear and exhaustion, hesitated. I can try, but it's been a long time since I worked on Deathworlder systems, and I don't know if I can. Focus. We need you, Celeste, Anthony said gently. The galaxy needs you. She took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening slightly. Okay, tell me what to do. For the next few minutes, the command center was filled with the rapid-fire exchange of technical jargon as Anthony and Celeste worked together. Anthony barking out commands, Celeste's fingers flying across the console, guiding him through the labyrinthine menus and adjustments. As they prepared to broadcast the signal, a low hum permeated the outpost, growing steadily louder. The consoles flickered erratically, throwing off sparks. What's happening? Hayes barked, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Energy fluctuations, Commander, a nearby technician yelled. Off the charts, something's interfering with the signal. The no-aggression pattern wavered on the main screen, distorting into an unreadable mess of static and broken code. Just as the signal stabilized, 3 of the Deathworlder ships broke formation, their trajectories aimed directly at Outpost 7. They're not responding. A sensor operator shouted, his voice filled with panic. They're heading straight for us. Weapons hot, Hayes roared, his face hardening. Prepare for imminent attack, Celeste gasped, clutching her head. No, they wouldn't, not without weight, Anthony yelled, his eyes glued to a different set of readings. They're not firing, they're transmitting a tight band encrypted signal. It's overriding the no-aggression broadcast. Encrypted, what's the point of that? Hayes grumbled. I don't know, sir, but it's there, Anthony said, already working to isolate the signal. He struggled against the entity's interference, the data stream flickering in and out of existence. It's heavily degraded, but I think I can pull something out. Celeste, despite her fear, leaned closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Wait, I recognize some of those sequences, old combat distress codes and a request for assistance. Assistance? Hayes scoffed. The Deathworlders asking for our assistance. That's absurd. There's more, Anthony said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. A series of coordinates, pointing to a location on a nearby moon. Hayes narrowed his eyes. A trap. They're trying to lure us into a trap. Maybe, Anthony conceded. But what if they're not? What if they have something? Something vital, some kind of information or technology that could help us understand what we're facing. Celeste stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. Commander, I know these codes. These ships are in dire need. The Deathworlders. They would only ask for help if they absolutely needed it. They are fleeing, not attacking. Hayes hesitated, his gaze shifting between the approaching Deathworlder ships, the distorted readings on the main screen, and the pleading faces of Anthony and Celeste. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, his face a mask of indecision. Damn it all to hell, he muttered. All right, I'll authorize a small scouting team, heavily armored transport ship, but that's it. We gather information and we get out. Our primary mission is protecting this sector. As the transport ship powered up, preparing for launch, a piercing alarm blared through the outpost. The sensor readings spiked dramatically, reaching levels that the technicians had never seen before. Commander, a frantic voice called out. The energy signature. It's altering course. It's heading straight for the moon. At the same moment, the Deathworlder ships shifted their trajectory, positioning themselves between Outpost 7 and the approaching energy signature. Anthony, his eyes darting between the sensor readings and the tactical display, felt a cold dread creep into his heart. Wait a minute. The coordinates on the moon, they're directly in the entity's path. He turned to Hayes, his voice urgent. Commander, they're not asking for help. They're trying to lure us out there. We're the bait. But it was too late. The transport ship launched, its engines roaring as it sped towards the moon. Just as it cleared the launch bay, a blinding wave of energy erupted from the entity, engulfing the Deathworlder ships in a silent, incandescent flash. The outpost sensors overloaded and the comms went dead. We've lost contact with the scouting team. A technician screamed. The energy wave, now unimpeded, washed over Outpost 7, shaking the station violently. Then it continued on its path, heading directly towards the densely populated sector of the galaxy. The Deathworlder's signal had been nothing more than a distraction, while they escaped. The outpost shuddered, a metallic groan resonating through the corridors. Red lights pulsed erratically, casting long, distorted shadows. Alarms blared, a cacophony of urgent warnings. What was that? Anthony shouted over the din, bracing himself against a console. Sparks showered from a damaged panel nearby. Celeste, her large eyes wide with alarm, moved with surprising speed for someone still recovering. Energy fluctuations. Severe. The wave. It overloaded several systems. She pointed towards a flickering monitor displaying a cascade of error codes. Communications and long-range sensors are down. Anthony swore under his breath. Great, just great. He slammed a fist on the console, the metal ringing dully. Try to get comms back online. I'll check the sensor arrays. He navigated the chaotic corridors, the smell of ozone thick in the air. The sensor array was a mess, wires sparking and consoles blank. He rerouted power manually, his fingers flying over the damaged circuits, a grimace etched on his face. Come on, you piece of junk, he muttered. Back in communications, Celeste was frantically adjusting frequencies, her brow furrowed in concentration. Scouting team, this is Outpost 7. Do you read? Over. Only static answered. She tried again, boosting the signal, her voice imbued with desperation. Scouting team, respond, please. Silence. A heavy, chilling silence. Anthony returned, his face grim. Sensors are fried. I managed to get minimal range, but it's not enough to reach them. Celeste slumped back in her chair, her shoulders slumping. Nothing, they're gone. A voice crackled over the internal comms, cutting through the tension. It was Hayes. All personnel, this is Commander Hayes. The scouting team is considered lost. Initiate full retreat to designated fallback point. Prepare for immediate departure. That is an order. Anthony stared at the comm panel, his heart made. You can't be serious, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Hayes' voice was cold and clinical. Outpost 7 is compromised. We can't risk further losses. We're severing ties. Prepare for departure, Jackson. But what about the outpost? Anthony argued, his voice rising. It's strategically important. And what about the data we've collected? We can't just abandon it. Celeste placed a hand on his arm, her eyes pleading. Commander, with all due respect, running will only delay the inevitable. We need to understand what we're facing. There might be a clue, something they found on the Deathworlder ship. Hayes was unmoved. Negative. Our priority is survival. The data is secondary, that is all. The comms went dead. Anthony banged his head on the console again, harder this time. Damn it, he's just giving up. Celeste was already back at her station, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. There might be something, a faint energy signature barely registering, its residual like a shadow. Anthony peered at the screen, his eyes narrowed. From the entity? Possibly. It's worth investigating. Hours blurred into a frenzy of activity. Celeste, fueled by caffeine and desperation, continued to translate the ancient Ithorian text. It speaks of the entity hunting based on biosignatures, concentrations of life force. Anthony's eyes widened. That's why it's heading towards populated areas. It's drawn to them. The realization hit them both like a physical blow. The Deathworlders weren't just running, they were inadvertently leading the entity towards more populated sectors. "We have to warn them," Celeste said, her voice trembling, but Hayes' orders were clear. And when they tried to access the main comm array, a message flashed on the screen: "Access DENIED." "He locked us out," Anthony growled. "He knows what we're up to." They were on their own. Working in secret, fueled by stolen power and sheer determination, they continued to analyze the energy signature. The faint signal pulsed rhythmically, a ghostly echo of something vast and terrifying. "It's distorting space-time," Anthony said, his voice hushed with awe and dread. "That's how it's traveling so fast. It's bending the rules." "Then we need to bend them back," Celeste said, her eyes gleaming with a spark of defiance. Anthony ran simulations, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. I think I have an idea, a counter-distortion. If we can generate a specific frequency, we might be able to weaken it." Suddenly, the main view screen flickered to life, displaying a horrifying image. A planet bathed in the sickly green glow of the entity's energy wave was being consumed. Its atmosphere was being ripped away, sucked into the void. Celeste gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It's feeding." The image burned into their minds, a stark reminder of the stakes. They had to act, and they had to act now. Anthony moved towards the terminal to begin implementing his plan, only to find the system locked. "He's really locked us out of everything." Celeste stepped in. "I know this system. Let me try." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through layers of security protocols with practiced ease. A progress bar slowly crept across the screen. Almost there. With a final keystroke, the lock disengaged. "I told you I knew my way around these systems." As they worked, Anthony sifted through the Deathworlder data logs, a frown etched on his face. "Wait a minute. There's something here, a hidden message." He decrypted the message, his eyes widening in disbelief. "It speaks of a weakness. A specific energy frequency that can disrupt the entity's core structure. Can we generate it?" Celeste asked, her voice filled with hope. Anthony shook his head. "Not with our current equipment. We need a unique amplifier. Something we don't have." He stared at the outpost's primary communication array, a towering structure that dominated the landscape. An idea, crazy and desperate, began to form in his mind. Maybe we can modify the array, use it as an amplifier." Celeste looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. "That's incredibly risky, Anthony. It could destroy the array." "I know," he said, his voice grim. "But it's the only chance we've got." As they prepared for the modification, the view screen flickered again, showing another planet consumed by the entity's energy wave. Another world gone in an instant. The scale of the threat was incomprehensible. Taking a deep breath, Anthony looked at Celeste. "Ready?" Celeste nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Let's do it." They began the process, rerouting power, recalibrating frequencies, pushing the outpost systems to their absolute limit. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the air crackled with energy. They were gambling everything on this one decision, knowing that the fate of humanity and all alien species hung in the balance. Anthony cursed under his breath as another spark shot from the exposed wiring. "Damn it, Celeste, I thought you said you stabilized the power regulators." He wiped sweat from his brow, the stale air of the comms room thick with the smell of ozone and desperation. "I did, but these systems, they're not designed for this kind of load," Celeste replied, her voice strained. She wrestled with a recalcitrant conduit, her multiple arms a blur of motion. "The architecture is antiquated." The lights flickered violently, plunging half the room into shadow. Emergency sirens wailed briefly before sputtering into silence. "We've got bigger problems," Anthony said, pointing to a diagnostic screen. "Power fluctuations are off the charts. Something's interfering with the core systems." Celeste paused, her brow furrowed. "It's the entity," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's energy waves. They're resonating with the outpost's power grid, amplifying the instability." Anthony swore again, louder this time. "So what do? We can't even get this damn thing online, let alone transmit anything if the power keeps surging." Celeste turned, her eyes filled with a desperate dedication. "We reroute power from non-essential systems, stabilize the array." Anthony stared at her aghast. "Reroute power? Are you crazy? That'll kill life support to half the station. People will die." "And what choice do we have, Anthony?" Celeste pleaded, her voice cracking. "If that thing consumes another galaxy, what good is life support? We're talking about the survival of everything." He hesitated, his mind racing. He knew she was right logically, but the thought of condemning his fellow crewmates. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Celeste said, her voice firm. "We're out of time." She reached for the main power conduit controls. "Ithorian Command Override Code 729. Engage." Anthony grabbed her arm. "Wait, let me do it. I know the system better. I can minimize the impact. Maybe." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "But if life support goes down completely, I'm holding you personally responsible." They worked in tense silence, rerouting power from auxiliary lighting, environmental controls, even the hydroponics bay. Each adjustment brought a fresh cascade of error messages and system warnings. Sparks flew, wires hissed, and the air grew thick with the smell of burning plastic. Suddenly, the door hissed open and Commander Hayes strode in, his face a mask of fury. "What in the blazes is going on here?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the cramped space. "I felt the power fluctuations all the way on the command deck. What are you two doing?" "We're modifying the communication array, Commander," Anthony said, trying to sound calm. "Modifying? Without authorization? Are you insane? I ordered you to prepare for immediate evacuation. We're on a collision course with a Deathworlder fleet." Hayes stepped closer, eyes flashing. "Cease this immediately and return to your stations. That's an order." Anthony stood his ground. "With all due respect, Commander, escaping is futile. The Deathworlders aren't our enemy, there's something else. Something far worse, and this array is our only chance to fight it." "You're delusional, Jackson," Hayes roared. "This is insubordination. I'm giving you one last chance. Stand down or I'll be forced to use force." He reached for his sidearm. Celeste moved with astonishing speed. Her hand shot out, disabling Hayes' access panel to the main systems with a series of rapid manipulations. The panel went dark. "I apologize, Commander," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, "but we cannot allow you to jeopardize the galaxy." Hayes sputtered with rage. You traitorous alien, you'll regret this." Ignoring him, Anthony grabbed a handful of salvaged components, discarded circuit boards, fragments of Deathworlder technology, lengths of copper wire, and began assembling them on a nearby workbench. "We need to shield the array from the entity's energy waves," he muttered, his fingers flying. "Create a Faraday cage of sorts. Focus the electromagnetic field." They worked feverishly, the fate of the galactic realm hanging in the balance. Another news report flickered across a nearby screen, showing a once vibrant planet being consumed by the entity's insatiable hunger. The images fueled their desperation. "I've found a pattern," Celeste said, her voice urgent. "In the energy waves. I can predict its next target." She pointed to a star chart. "It's Hedino towards." "Oh no, there's nothing close enough to help." The power fluctuations intensified, the lights flickering erratically. The communication array groaned under the strain, sparks erupting from its overloaded circuits. "We're running out of time," Anthony shouted, his voice barely audible above the din. With a final surge of energy, Anthony connected the last wire. "Okay, Celeste, get ready to transmit the disrupting frequency." Just then, the entire room pulsed with raw energy. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the communication array began to glow with an eerie light. "It's overloading," Celeste cried. Without hesitation, Anthony lunged forward, rerouting the excess power from the array directly into his own life support systems. The monitors flatlined, alarms blared, but the array stabilized. "Transmit," he gasped, his vision blurring. Celeste slammed her hand down on the activation switch. The array hummed, then roared to life, sending out a powerful pulse of energy into the void. They waited, holding their breath, but nothing happened. The entity continued its inexorable advance, consuming everything in its path. Then a surge of energy arced back through the array, striking Celeste with the force of a lightning bolt. She cried out and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Anthony scrambled to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. He checked her pulse, his hands trembling. It was faint, but there. He looked back at the monitors, at the encroaching entity, at the flatlining readings on his own life support. They were running out of time. Celeste lay still, the Ithorian flesh of her face pale against the makeshift bed. Anthony pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was thready, but there. Her vitals, according to the archaic scanner he'd managed to salvage, were stable, hovering just above critical. He glanced up at the main view screen. The sensor readings painted a grim picture. The entity continued its inexorable path, stars winking out of existence as it consumed their energy, the transmission having achieved nothing to stop it. He cursed under his breath. A klaxon blared, cutting through the tense silence. Red lights flashed. Lockdown initiated. Sector 7 restricted. All personnel report to designated stations. Hayes, the bastard, had regained control. Anthony knew this wasn't about protocol. It was about control, about Celeste. Ignoring the order, Anthony hoisted Celeste into his arms, her light frame surprisingly easy to carry. He slipped out of the med bay just as the blast doors hissed shut, sealing off the sector. He navigated the familiar corridors, his boots echoing on the metal floor, his mind racing. He needed to analyze the transmission data to see if it had done anything at all. He needed access to the central computer. He reached the computer terminal and punched in a bypass code he'd memorized years ago, a relic from his rebellious youth. The screen flickered to life, displaying a cascade of data. He filtered the information, focusing on the energy readings surrounding the entity. Then he saw it, a minuscule fluctuation, a barely perceptible dip in the energy consumption rate. It was almost nothing, but it was there. The transmission had had an effect. It had slowed the entity, even if only by a fraction. Hope flickered in his chest. He ran the calculations again, extrapolating from the slowed consumption rate. The numbers swam before his eyes, coalescing into a pattern, a frequency. The entity's core frequency, if they could disrupt that frequency. A soft moan escaped Celeste's lips. Her eyes fluttered open, the dark pupils unfocused. She began to mutter in Ithorian, the guttural sounds alien and unintelligible. Anthony grabbed his recorder, activating it with a flick of his thumb. "Celeste, can you hear me? What are you saying?" She continued to mutter, her voice growing stronger, the words taking on a rhythmic quality. He recognized snippets of ancient Ithorian prophecy, tales of cosmic balance and a looming darkness. It was gibberish maybe, but he couldn't dismiss it. Not now. The lights flickered again and Hayes' voice boomed over the comm system. "Jackson, I know you're there. Release the Ithorian immediately. She requires a full medical evaluation. Her presence is a security risk." Anthony ignored him, focusing on Celeste's ramblings. What weakness? What origin? He whispered, trying to get her to focus. Hayes' voice turned icy. "This is your final warning, Jackson. Comply or I will be forced to use lethal force." "Go to hell, Hayes." Anthony replied, his voice tight. He knew Hayes wouldn't hesitate. Suddenly Hayes appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 security guards, their weapons raised. "Jackson, stand down." "She's not a security risk, Hayes," Anthony shouted back, positioning himself between Hayes and Celeste. "She's the only chance we have of stopping that thing. Her survival is directly tied to humanity's survival." "That's enough," Hayes barked, signaling the guards. "Seize her." The guards advanced, their faces grim. Anthony braced himself, knowing he was outmatched but refusing to back down. He wouldn't let Hayes get his hands on Celeste, not when she might hold the key to everything. One of the guards lunged for Celeste, and Anthony reacted instinctively, throwing a punch that connected with the guard's jaw. The guard stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Hayes swore and charged forward, attempting to grab Celeste himself. As Hayes reached for her, Celeste, still in her semi-conscious state, emitted a pulse of energy. It wasn't visible, but its effect was immediate. Hayes staggered back, clutching his head, his face contorted in pain. The neural implants that controlled his movements and augmented his senses had been disrupted. He was temporarily incapacitated. "Now," Anthony yelled, grabbing Celeste's hand and dragging her down the corridor. "We have to go now." They sprinted through the outpost, dodging security patrols, their destination a restricted section of the station. The section where the Deathworlder technology fragments were stored, the area where he might find a weapon. Inside the restricted section, Anthony activated the lights, revealing a collection of twisted metal and alien circuitry. He began sifting through the wreckage, his hands moving quickly, searching for anything that could help them. He found a heavily damaged energy weapon. It was cracked and blackened, but its core was intact. As he examined it further, he noticed something strange: modifications. The weapon had been altered, adapted, not for offensive purposes but for something else, to defend. As he dug deeper into the wreckage, he found more evidence of this: armor plating that was designed to deflect a specific type of energy, shield generators that resonated at a unique frequency. It became clear that the Deathworlders hadn't just been running, they had been fighting. They had been fighting it. A chilling realization dawned on him. The Deathworlders weren't running randomly. They were following a specific trajectory dictated by the entity's movements. They were trying to stay one step ahead, to lead it away from populated systems. Celeste groaned, her eyes snapping open, now fully alert. The void. She gasped, her voice weak. They avoided. The void between stars, near the exotic matter. Exotic matter? Anthony asked, his mind racing. What about it? They feared it. The Deathworlders feared it. They changed course to avoid it. Anthony accessed the outpost's long-range sensors, cross-referencing the location Celeste had described with the entity's projected path. His blood ran cold. The entity was on a direct collision course with a previously unknown populated planet, a world teeming with life, a world rich in exotic matter. He stared at the sensor readings, his heart pounding. Was that the key? Was that the entity's weakness? Would destroying that planet stop it? Or would it simply consume the planet and continue its rampage? The entity suddenly changed course. The projected path shifted, angling directly towards the outpost. A shiver ran down Anthony's spine. It knew about the transmission. It knew they were trying to stop it. "Celeste," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's coming here, it's targeting us." Celeste stared at the screen, her eyes wide with terror. "It knows us." She breathed. It adapted. The alarms clawed at his eardrums, a discordant symphony of klaxons and flashing strobes painting the cramped corridor in epileptic fits of red and white. Every deck plate vibrated, a deep, guttural tremor that resonated in Anthony's teeth. He grabbed Celeste's arm, pulling her forward. "Restricted section," he yelled over the din. "Now." The automated doors, thick slabs of plasteel, slammed shut behind them with echoing finality, sealing them into a maze of narrow corridors lined with blinking consoles and humming machinery. The air thrummed with nearly unleashed power. He yanked open a panel, revealing a chaotic nest of wires. The Deathworlder tech, inert and alien, sat on a nearby table, mocking him with its silent complexity. Anthony wrestled with the weapon fragments, his fingers fumbling over unfamiliar interfaces. He rerouted power, bypassed safety protocols, swore under his breath. The device sputtered, a brief flash of violet light illuminating the chamber before dying with a pathetic whine. "Damn it!" He pounded his fist on the console. It needs something more. More power than this whole damn outpost can generate. Celeste, her breathing rag pointed towards the ceiling. The primary life support grid. It's a heavily shielded line, but if we can tap into it. Anthony hesitated. Life support. That wasn't just a few lights dimming. That was oxygen, temperature regulation, waste recycling. That's a hell of a risk, Celeste. For everyone. It's a risk we have to take, she countered, her voice strained but firm. Unless you have a better idea. His calm crackled to life. It was Hayes. Jackson, this is the captain. I know you're in the restricted section. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Anthony's gut clenched. Go ahead, Captain. Surrender the Ithorian and the Deathworlder tech. In exchange, I'll guarantee your safe passage off this station in an escape pod. No charges filed, just walk away. And what about the entity? Anthony asked, his voice tight. Hayes paused. We'll deal with it, just bring them to the main hangar, we'll handle the rest. Anthony's eyes narrowed. Handle it how, Captain? By sacrificing us as bait? Or by trying to dissect Celeste and reverse engineer the Deathworlder tech for yourself? He didn't wait for a response. He killed the connection. He's lying, Celeste said, stating the obvious. Damn right he is. Anthony turned back to the life support grid access panel. Hold tight, this is going to get messy. He initiated the power rerouting sequence. The lights flickered violently, plunging sections of the outpost into darkness. Alarms blared even louder, joined by a chorus of angry shouts from the rest of the crew over the comms. Jackson, what the hell are you doing? Outside, the outpost's shields groaned under immense pressure. The gravitational distortions intensified. Objects floated momentarily before slamming back down. Lights bent and twisted, creating bizarre visual illusions. Celeste gasped, clutching her head. Vivid images flashed behind her eyes, burning forests, crumbling cities, the screams of her people, the gravitational anomalies. They were triggering something. The energy. It's not just consuming, it's converting matter into something else, a void, converting. Anthony asked, his mind racing. Like dark energy? Celeste nodded, her eyes wide with terror. The Deathworlders. They weren't just trying to stop it, they were trying to reverse it, to restore what was lost. He noticed a seam in the wall, previously hidden by a holographic display. He pressed his hand against it and the wall slid open, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, bathed in a soft blue light, was a fully intact Deathworlder device, an energy converter. What is it? Anthony breathed, awestruck. A dark energy manipulator, Celeste whispered. It could create a shield or a weapon, but it needs a living component, an organic calibrator. She looked at Anthony, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and purpose. I can do it. The Ithorian prophecy. It spoke of this, a species that could interface with the darkness. No, Anthony said, his voice firm. No way, Celeste, I'm not letting you turn yourself into a battery. It's our only chance, Anthony, she pleaded. Not just for the outpost, but for everything. He knew she was right. He just didn't want to admit it. He didn't want to lose her. With a sigh, he activated the converter. The machine hummed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie blue glow. Celeste stepped towards the calibration chamber, a cylindrical tube filled with swirling energy. As the energy converter whirred, a violent shudder racked the outpost. A section of the outer hull buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal. The entity had struck. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space. The entity began to bore into the base, tearing through bulkheads like paper. Celeste screamed as the chamber lights intensified, blinding white. The screen cut to black. The energy converter whined, a drawn-out mechanical sigh that ended abruptly as its lights flickered and died. Beside it, Celeste slumped, her multiple eyes fluttering closed. She was alive. He could feel the faint pulse in her tentacled arm as he leaned close, but unconscious. Then the deck lurched. A grinding screech tore through the outpost as if metal were being peeled apart by colossal claws. Red emergency lights flickered to life, painting the scene in a hellish glow. The artificial gravity sputtered, throwing Anthony against the wall. He tasted blood where his lip had split. What the hell? He wrestled himself back to Celeste, hauling her from the machine's embrace. A faint, almost imperceptible energy signature pulsed from her, a subtle warmth radiating against his hand. He didn't have time to analyze it. Alarms blared, a cacophony of klaxons and synthesized voices warning of multiple system failures. The lights flickered again, plunging sections of the outpost into darkness, punctuated by the crackling of overloaded circuits. From the shadows emerged Commander Hayes, his face grim. 2 security officers flanked him, weapons raised. "Seal off this section," Hayes barked, his voice echoing in the chaotic environment. "No one in or out. This area is now under my direct control." Anthony hoisted Celeste over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She was surprisingly light. "You can't be serious, Hayes. We have a breach." "My priority is security," Hayes snarled. "And right now that means containing whatever you've brought onto this station." Anthony didn't argue. He knew that look. Hayes saw opportunity in chaos. He turned and ran, Celeste bouncing against his back, deeper into the outpost. The fluctuating gravity made every step a gamble. Pipes burst, spraying steam. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of crew members huddled together, their faces etched with fear and confusion. One woman clutched a bleeding arm. A man cradled his head, eyes glazed over. "Help us," the woman cried, her voice hoarse. "We don't know where to go." Anthony hesitated. He could escape, try to find a secure location, maybe even get off the outpost, but leaving them. He looked at their faces, their desperation mirrored his own fear. He swore under his breath. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "I know this place. Stay close to me." He shifted Celeste slightly, getting a better grip. "We're going to try and make it to Sector 4. There's a reinforced shelter there." As he started to move, Celeste groaned, her eyes fluttering open. "The frequency," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the alarms. "The prophecy, it showed me, a frequency." Her eyes rolled back and she went limp again. "What frequency?" Anthony muttered, but she was gone again. He pushed the thought aside for now. He had to get them all to safety. He led the group through the maze of corridors, using his intimate knowledge of the outpost's layout to avoid the worst of the damage. They reached a junction and Celeste's eyes snapped open. "There," she rasped, pointing a shaky finger down a darkened corridor. "The communication array, damaged, but it can be modified." That was when Hayes and his security team caught up to them. "Nowhere left to run, Jackson," Hayes said, his voice dangerously calm. "Hand over the Ithorian and whatever technology she has. Now." "This isn't what you think, Hayes," Anthony said, trying to buy time. "That Deathworlder tech, it's not a weapon, it's a defense against that thing out there." Celeste stirred again, her voice gaining strength. "The entity, it feeds on dark energy, destroying the core. Would only draw it here, we need to repel it." Hayes sneered. "Lies, I'm not a fool, Jackson. That Deathworlder technology is too dangerous." Hayes gave a signal and the security team opened fire. Anthony reacted instantly, diving for cover behind an overturned equipment crate, dragging Celeste with him. He pulled his sidearm, a standard-issue pulse pistol, and returned fire, aiming for their weapons, not to kill. He jury-rigged the power settings months ago after a training accident. Stinging but non-lethal. During the brief exchange, one of the security officers stumbled, caught in the fluctuating gravity. As he fell, a tendril of swirling darkness erupted from a nearby conduit and enveloped his arm. The officer screamed, a sound that was abruptly cut short. The tendril retracted, leaving behind an empty uniform. Hayes stared in horror. Anthony seized the opportunity. He grabbed Celeste and sprinted down the corridor toward the damaged communication array, leaving Hayes and the remaining security officer behind, frozen in shock. They reached the array, a mangled mess of wires and sparking components. "Can you fix it?" Anthony asked, his voice breathless. Celeste nodded weakly. I saw the schematics, the frequency. It's in the Ithorian prophecy. She reached out, her tentacled hand trembling as it touched the damaged console. As her fingers brushed against the cold metal, the console flickered to life. Holographic images flashed across the screen, swirling constellations and ancient Ithorian text. A blueprint, a complex diagram of energy pathways materialized before them. There, Celeste gasped, pointing to a specific sequence. That's it, the frequency. Anthony started rerouting power, connecting damaged circuits, ignoring the stinging shocks that ran up his arms. The entity was getting closer. He could feel it, a cold dread that settled deep in his bones. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the array hummed, a low, resonant tone that vibrated through the floor. Anthony threw the final switch. A beam of pure energy erupted from the array, bathing the corridor in an ethereal glow. The swirling darkness of the entity recoiled, pushed back by the force of the energy. For a moment there was silence, a moment of triumph. Then the darkness shifted, adapted. The beam faltered, weakened, and a new alarm blared to life, a synthesized voice screaming, "Warning." Long-range sensors detecting a massive energy signature approaching the planet. Anthony cursed under his breath, the words swallowed by the klaxons blaring throughout the outpost. "Comms array," he barked at Celeste, already moving towards the damaged section of the station. Now, the communication array control room was a disaster. Sparks showered from severed conduits, and flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across the scorched consoles. The air smelled of ozone and burnt plastic. Half the monitors were dark, their screens cracked and spider-webbed. "Looks like a plasma surge," Anthony muttered, running a diagnostic scan on a nearby console. "Fried most of the system's primary circuits." Celeste swayed slightly, her hand flying to her head. Another vision crashed over her, a chaotic jumble of schematics, energy flows, and alien symbols. She gasped, her breathing ragged. The secondary relays," she stammered, pointing to a section of the console that was little more than melted slag. "They need rerouting, but the sequence, it's broken." The images faded, leaving her disoriented and trembling. Anthony, already elbow-deep in the wreckage, glanced up. "Broken how? Give me something I can work with." He was stripping wires, his movements precise and efficient despite the chaos. "We don't have time for riddles." He worked with a frantic energy, scavenging components from other consoles, soldering wires with quick, practiced movements. He bypassed damaged circuits, rerouted power flows, improvising solutions that would have made the original engineers weep. A distorted voice echoed from the doorway. "Fools," Hayes rasped, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "You think you can fight it with this? This primitive technology, you're only inviting it closer." His gait was unsteady, almost jerky. "The Deathworlder tech, it's a curse, it will damn us all." Anthony straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Hayes, you need to get back to medical, you're not making any sense." "Sense?" Hayes laughed, a high-pitched, unsettling sound. "I'm seeing the truth, Jackson, the glorious truth, and it will set me free." He lunged, his movements impossibly fast, his hand outstretched like a claw. Anthony barely had time to react. He ducked under Hayes's swipe, the force of it whistling past his ear. Hayes was stronger, faster than he should be. He grabbed a wrench from his tool belt, swinging it in a wide arc. It connected with Hayes's shoulder with a sickening thud, but Hayes barely flinched. Celeste cried out, stumbling back. "Anthony, be careful, he's changed." Hayes roared, a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate the very air. He grabbed Anthony by the throat, lifting him off his feet. Anthony struggled, kicking and clawing, but Hayes's grip was like iron. Spots danced before his eyes. Celeste, despite her injuries, didn't hesitate. She grabbed a discarded power cable, lashing it across Hayes's back. Hayes howled in pain, releasing Anthony. Anthony gasped for air, scrambling back, his throat burning. He saw it then, a faint, shimmering energy flickering around Hayes's eyes, a subtle distortion of the air around him. "It speaks to me," Hayes snarled, his voice a twisted echo of its former self. "It promises power, transcendence. All I have to do is help it come." Anthony, fueled by adrenaline and a primal instinct to survive, charged. He tackled Hayes, driving him against a sparking console. Wires snapped and a shower of sparks erupted around them. He had to hurt him. With a desperate surge of strength, Anthony smacked his head into Hayes's jaw. Hayes went limp, slumping to the floor. Anthony stood over him, chest heaving, the wrench still clutched in his hand. He felt a wave of nausea, the weight of what he'd just done settling heavily on his shoulders. "Get him to a secure cell," he said, his voice hoarse. "Seal it tight, and run every diagnostic you can. Find out what the hell is happening to him." He knew deep down that it wasn't just Hayes anymore. He looked at Celeste, concern etched on his face. "I don't like this, detaining a crew member like this. It feels wrong." Celeste placed a gentle hand on his arm. "That wasn't Hayes, Anthony, not the man we knew." Her eyes were filled with a deep sadness. Anthony shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He refocused on the task at hand, returning to the mangled console. "All right," he said, his voice regaining its professional edge. "Let's see if we can get this damn thing working." Ray immersed himself in the repairs, following the fragmented schematics from Celeste's vision. Hours blurred into a relentless cycle of soldering, rerouting, and improvising. Finally, with a last-ditch splice and a whispered prayer, Anthony managed to bring a section of the communication array back online. A single monitor flickered to life, displaying a screen filled with static. "We have a signal," he announced, his voice infused with exhaustion. "But it's weak, damn weak." Even after the fixes Celeste showed him, it was not enough. Celeste closed her eyes, focusing, pushing past the pain and the fear, trying to grasp the missing piece. "The frequency. It needs amplification," she whispered, her voice strained. "A specific crystal, a resonance frequency. It's the key." They searched the outpost, their hope dwindling with each passing minute. Finally, they stumbled upon a forgotten storage section, a relic from the outpost's early days. It was filled with dusty crates, discarded equipment, and the ghosts of forgotten experiments. "This place was used for research," Anthony said, his voice hushed. "Before my time. Mostly dead-end stuff if the rumors are true." And then they saw it, a small crystalline structure humming with a faint inner light, resting on a pedestal in the center of the room. Beside it, half buried under a pile of debris, was a piece of twisted metal, unmistakably Deathworlder in origin. They were studying Deathworlder tech, Anthony breathed, his eyes wide. Here, all this time. The implications of that discovery hung heavy in the air. As they reached for the crystal, a chilling laugh echoed through the storage section. Hayes stood in the doorway, his body contorted, his skin stretched and glistening with an unnatural sheen. His eyes glowed with the same eerie energy they had seen before. "You cannot stop it," he hissed, his voice a grotesque parody of its former self. "It is inevitable." He raised his hand, and a wave of the entity's energy surged towards them, crackling and spitting like raw lightning. The energy slammed into the communication array, ripping through the repaired circuits, sending sparks flying. The monitor flickered and died. Ignoring the pain, ignoring the fear, Anthony lunged forward, grabbing the crystal and jamming it into the designated slot. A surge of power coursed through the array, and the monitor flickered back to life, displaying a slightly clearer image of static. But it was still weak, pathetically weak. Celeste cried out, clutching her head. This time the vision was overwhelming, a torrent of information that threatened to drown her. She saw the truth, stark and terrifying. "It's not amplification," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the din. "It's a beacon, the frequency. It's calling to something. Out there." A crackling voice broke through the static on the monitor, fragmented and distorted, but undeniably a response. "Vessel, on its way, distress, coordinates." A nearby planet responded. They were coming to help, but the hope was short-lived. As the message faded, the energy signature around the outpost intensified, solidifying, becoming almost tangible. The lights flickered and the metal groaned. The entity had adapted. Hayes, his body now grotesquely mutated, stumbled towards the escape vessel, a twisted smile on his face. "No one escapes," he croaked, his voice a chorus of whispers. "It must be ready." He was preparing the area for the entity. He would ensure that no one escaped. "Docking clamps disabled," the voice shrieked over the comms, static crackling around the edges of the transmission. "Hayes, he's locked us out, we can't dock safely." Anthony swore, smacking his fist on the console. What the hell is going on down there? He didn't wait for an answer. Lights flickered erratically in the corridor, casting long, dancing shadows. A nearby door hissed shut with unnecessary force. Small things, but enough to set his teeth on edge. "The entity," he muttered, "it's getting stronger." "We have to override the clamps," Celeste said, her voice tight with urgency. "Manually." The docking clamps were a tangle of hydraulic pistons and magnetic seals designed for automated operation. Now the control panel was a mess of corrupted code and fried circuits. "He booby-trapped it," Anthony said, tracing a line of melted wires. "Damn it, Hayes was always a meticulous bastard." Celeste gasped, her hand flying to her head. Images flashed behind her eyes. Hayes, hunched over the control panel, his face gaunt and pale, planting small, cylindrical devices near the access points. "I see it," she said, her voice strained. "A failsafe. A disarming code, but it's incomplete. I can only see part of it." Anthony worked furiously, rerouting power, bypassing corrupted systems, his fingers flying across the damaged console. "Give me what you've got," he barked, sweat beading on his forehead. Celeste recited the numbers, her brow furrowed in concentration. 7, 2, 0, 4, missing one number, then 8. Anthony typed in the sequence, pausing at the missing digit. "Damn it, which one?" He glanced at Celeste, her eyes squeezed shut, her face pale. "We don't have time for this. 1 through 9, pick one." 3, she blurted out, her voice cracking. He slammed his finger on the 3 key. The console sparked, showering them with molten plastic. A low groan echoed through the docking bay as the clamps began to release, millimeter by agonizing millimeter. Too late. A jolt ripped through the outpost. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. Magnetic field activated. A panicked voice screamed over the comms. "They're crashing." The escape vessel, caught in the magnetic flux, slammed into the docking bay with a deafening screech of tearing metal. The entire outpost shuddered. Anthony and Celeste stumbled towards the wreckage, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burning fuel. Bodies lay scattered amidst twisted metal and sparking wires. The silence was broken only by the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the moans of the injured. "Report!" Anthony yelled, his voice hoarse. A figure emerged from the wreckage, his uniform torn and bloody. "Captain Elias," he gasped. "We were ambushed. Shields were down before we even knew they were there. We barely made it." Then a figure emerged from the doorway, silhouetted against the flickering lights. Hayes. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and in his hand he held a makeshift weapon, a length of twisted metal, crackling with the entity's energy. "You can't help them," Hayes said, his voice a distorted echo. "They belong to it now." The air around him shimmered with heat. Anthony stepped forward, trying to keep Hayes' attention. "Hayes, what the hell are you doing? This isn't you." Celeste knelt beside Elias, her hands outstretched, chanting softly in Ithorian. But the entity's energy was a wall blocking her healing abilities. Elias groaned in pain. Another tremor rocked the outpost, stronger this time. Consoles sparked and died. "The magnetic field," Hayes hissed, his eyes burning into Anthony. "It's amplifying it. The planet welcomes its master." Elias struggled to his feet, ignoring Celeste's protests. "Get out of here," he said, his voice weak but firm. "I'll cover you. This ship isn't going anywhere without a pilot anyway." Anthony hesitated, his gut twisting. "We're not leaving you." "You don't have a choice," Elias said, shoving him towards the escape vessel. Go now. With a final desperate look, Anthony turned and followed Celeste into the damaged vessel. A handful of other crew members scrambled aboard, their faces etched with fear. As the vessel powered up its engines, Celeste gasped again, her eyes wide with terror. "There's a pathway," she whispered, "through the magnetic field. I see it, but it's fading." Anthony strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands trembling. "Guide me, Celeste. Tell me what you see." The vessel lurched forward, its engines straining against the distorted magnetic field. Debris swirled around them, propelled by unseen forces. Alarms blared as the hull scraped against twisted metal. "Left, hard left," Celeste cried, her voice barely audible above the din. "Now right, down, down." Suddenly, a hail of metal shards came screaming towards them, propelled by the outpost's corrupted magnetic system. Hayes was using the outpost itself as a weapon. Anthony wrestled with the controls, dodging the deadly projectiles, his heart pounding in his chest. The vessel groaned under the strain, sparks flying from damaged consoles. With a final surge of power, they broke through the magnetic field, escaping the outpost's immediate vicinity. But the vessel was crippled, its power failing. They looked back. The outpost, once a symbol of hope, was now engulfed in a swirling vortex of energy. The planet itself seemed to writhe, as if awakening to a terrible consciousness. Then a wave of pure energy washed over them, disabling the vessel's remaining systems. They were adrift, powerless at its mercy. A voice echoed in their minds, cold and ancient. "You cannot escape. All will be consumed. Join us. Or be nothing." "Never," Anthony spat, the word echoing in the cramped bridge. His hand tightened on the armrest, the worn fabric digging into his palm. An end to suffering? Sure. Just surrender your will, your hope, your very self. The entity's offer, so seductive in its promise of oblivion, tasted like ash in his mouth. A tremor ran through Celeste, her violet eyes wide with a terror that transcended the physical. The air thrummed with a psychic pressure, a suffocating weight that threatened to crush their minds. The entity was already probing, testing the defenses of their souls. Anthony felt the familiar sting of cynicism, the voice in his head whispering, "What's the point? You're just one man on a backwater station against a cosmic god. Give up, it's easier." He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to succumb. He glanced at Celeste. He couldn't let it win, not while she was still fighting. "It's trying to isolate us," Celeste gasped, her voice strained. "Turn us against each other. Don't let it." Another wave of psychic force washed over them. Celeste cried out, clutching her head. Images flashed through her mind, her homeworld burning, the screams of her people, the cold, empty void where her family had been. The vision was fragmented, chaotic, a kaleidoscope of pain and despair. She saw the entity's origins, or perhaps just a glimpse of its true nature, a force of pure, unadulterated chaos, a cosmic cancer consuming everything in its path. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, leaving her breathless and disoriented. Anthony, meanwhile, was fighting his own battle. The entity was dissecting his mind, exposing his deepest insecurities, his failures, his regrets. "You're a failure, Jackson. A washed-up comms officer stuck in the middle of nowhere. You can't save anyone." He forced himself to focus, to compartmentalize the chaos. He looked at the sensor readings, the energy signatures, the distorted waveforms of the entity's communication. There was a pattern, a subtle rhythm beneath the cacophony. It struggled with certain frequencies, certain emotional resonances, hope, sacrifice. It was like trying to process a language it didn't understand. It doesn't understand hope," Anthony muttered, his fingers flying across the console. "Or sacrifice, strong, positive emotions. Maybe that's its weakness." Celeste, still reeling from her vision, nodded slowly. "I can try. Focus my empathy, project hope outwards." She closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. A faint golden light emanated from her, a wave of pure, unadulterated hope washing over the bridge. But it seemed to have little effect. The entity merely intensified its attack, its mental probes growing sharper, more insistent. "It's not enough," Anthony said, his voice tight. "We need to amplify it, broadcast it, let everyone know they're not alone." He pointed to the ship's communication array. "Use that, send a message of hope to anyone who might be listening." Celeste hesitated. "It's risky. It could attract the entity's attention." "We don't have a choice," Anthony said grimly. He began rerouting power to the array, his movements precise and efficient. "Let's give it something to chew on besides our nightmares." They worked together, their movements synchronized, their minds focused on a single goal. Celeste channeled her empathy into the array, amplifying her feelings of hope and willpower. Anthony calibrated the frequencies, fine-tuning the signal to penetrate the entity's interference. They sent the message, a desperate plea for help echoing across the void, but the entity was ready. It twisted the signal, distorting it, filling it with despair and hopelessness. The message became a weapon, amplifying the fear and trauma of anyone who heard it. Celeste cried out, collapsing against the console. "Stop, you're hurting them." Anthony cut the transmission, his face pale. "Damn it. It's too strong." Then another vision struck Celeste, more intense than the last. She saw a specific frequency, a complex harmonic resonance used by the Deathworlder fleet. It wasn't a frequency of hope, but something else. Something stronger, grit. A grim, unwavering drive to survive regardless of the cost. "The Deathworlders," she gasped, her eyes snapping open. "Their frequency. It resonates with persistence." Anthony didn't hesitate. He retuned the communication array, overriding the entity's interference. The console flickered, the air crackling with energy. "Here we go. Hope this isn't a trap." Static filled the bridge, punctuated by bursts of distorted sound. Then a voice, cold and metallic, cut through the noise. "Unidentified vessel. This is Deathworlder warship Oblivion's Edge. State your intentions and species, immediately." Anthony swallowed hard. This is Anthony Jackson, Human Communications Officer on a remote outpost. We need help. We're under attack by something you need to know about." "Attack?" The Deathworlder captain's voice was permeated with skepticism. "By what?" "Another species foolish enough to challenge the Deathworlder fleet. We have seen what this entity can do, little insect. Do not waste our time." Celeste had another vision, this one focused on the Deathworlder captain. She saw their fear, their trauma, the countless battles they had fought against the entity. She saw their desperation, their weariness, their tenacity to protect their own people, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. "He's afraid," Celeste whispered to Anthony. "Terrified. He's seen what it can do." Anthony nodded, his mind racing. He adjusted his voice, injecting it with a note of urgency and sincerity. "Captain, I understand your caution, but this isn't just another species. This is something different, something that threatens everyone. We know its weakness and we know how to fight it, but we can't do it alone. Please, you have to listen to me." There was a long pause, the silence stretching taut with tension. Then the Deathworlder captain spoke again, their voice slightly less harsh. "We will grant you a brief parley. Transmit your coordinates. But be warned, human, any sign of deception, any hint of treachery, and we will vaporize you without hesitation." "Understood, Captain," Anthony said, his heart pounding in his chest. He transmitted their coordinates, his fingers trembling slightly. "Explain yourselves," the captain said, once the coordinates had been received. "Why should we risk our lives for another species? What proof do you have of your claims?" Anthony took a deep breath. "We know its weakness, Captain, the strength of a unified species commitment, and we believe that humanity's ingenuity, our ability to adapt and innovate, can give you the edge you need. We have to work together." Celeste gasped, clutching her head. Another vision, more overwhelming than the others. She saw the entity, its tendrils reaching across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. And then she saw the Ithorian prophecy, the ancient words glowing in her mind. "The devourer of worlds shall come, but the key to unity shall be found in the unlikeliest of species." She looked at Anthony, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "It's true," she whispered. "The prophecy. It speaks of this. We have to trust each other." The Deathworlder captain was silent for a long moment. Finally, they spoke, their voice devoid of emotion. "We will consider your proposal. Prepare to be boarded." The transmission cut off, leaving Anthony and Celeste alone in the silence of the bridge. The faint glimmer of hope was there, but the uncertainty of the Deathworlder's intentions cast a long shadow. They had made contact, but the alliance was still tentative, fragile. The destiny of the universe hung in the balance, dependent on the fragile trust between a cynical human, a traumatized Ithorian, and a fleet of ruthless Deathworlders. The comm system hissed, then cleared. A voice devoid of warmth filled the outpost's bridge. "Earth Outpost. This is Kale, captain of the Deathworlder vessel Harbinger. Establish secure channel Gamma 9. Acknowledge." Anthony, still reeling from the sudden appearance of the fleet, swallowed. Beside him, Celeste trembled slightly, her large, mournful eyes fixed on the main view screen. He keyed his comm. "This is Lieutenant Jackson, Earth Outpost 3, channel Gamma 9 established. Transmit all data you possess regarding the entity, tactical analysis, sensor readings, anything you have compiled. Do not withhold information. We will analyze its veracity. Your understanding is rudimentary." The transmission cut. Anthony glanced at Celeste. Well, that was charming. He forced a wry smile, trying to mask his own unease. Let's give him what he wants, everything. They worked quickly, compiling their data, Anthony's meticulous analysis of the energy signatures, Celeste's fragmented visions, the Ithorian prophecies. Celeste hesitated before uploading her visions, her face pale. "They are personal and frightening." "They might be the key, Celeste," Anthony said gently. "We have to trust them." The data flowed across the void. Silence stretched thick and heavy for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Kale's voice returned, colder than before. "Your data confirms our own observations. The entity. It has consumed countless worlds. We have suffered heavy losses attempting to contain it." A flicker of something that might have been pain crossed his voice. "Its power is immense." Celeste gasped, clutching her head. A vision slammed into her. A battlefield of twisted metal and shattered energy shields. Deathworlder ships, sleek and powerful, were being swatted aside like insects by an unseen force. The entity, a swirling vortex of darkness and light, pulsed with insatiable hunger. She cried out, the vision receding, leaving her breathless and shaken. It adapts," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It learns from everything it consumes. Their weapons. They were useless. It knew them before they fired." Anthony felt a chill crawl down his spine. "It's not just consuming energy," he said, his voice tight. "It's consuming knowledge, experiences, it's evolving." He looked at Kale's image on the screen, a desperate idea forming in his mind. "We need to combine our knowledge, your technology, our ingenuity. We need to find a new weakness." Kale was silent for a long moment. "A joint research project with humans." He sounded incredulous. "Your methods are unorthodox." "We're adaptable," Anthony countered. "We think outside the box, it's what we do." A sigh, almost imperceptible, came through the comm. "Very well, I will assign a team of our scientists to work with you. But be warned, Lieutenant, we do not tolerate incompetence." The Deathworlder scientists arrived soon after. Tall, imposing figures clad in black armor, their faces hidden behind visors. They moved with a cold efficiency that made Anthony's team feel clumsy and disorganized. The initial meetings were tense. The Deathworlders favored a pragmatic, data-driven approach, while Anthony's team relied on intuition and creative problem-solving. "Your hypotheses are illogical," one of the Deathworlder scientists, a female named Lyra, stated flatly, her voice synthesized through her helmet. "They lack empirical evidence." "And your methods are rigid," Anthony retorted. "You're so focused on what you know that you're missing what you could discover." Celeste, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward. "Perhaps." Perhaps my visions can help, she offered hesitantly. I have seen patterns, frequencies. Working together, they began to piece together a theory. Celeste's visions, combined with Anthony's analysis of the entity's energy signature, revealed a potential vulnerability, specific energy frequencies that disrupted its ability to absorb knowledge. We have a weapon that can generate those frequencies, Lyra said, her voice softening slightly, but it is too weak. It would be like throwing pebbles at a mountain. We can modify it, Anthony said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. We can amplify its power output. We've done it before. Kale's image appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Tampering with proven technology is risky. The consequences could be catastrophic. Celeste closed her eyes, focusing on the weapon, on the entity, on the desperate hope for survival. A new vision flooded her mind, a complex configuration of energy conduits and focusing crystals. The weapon. It needs to be reconfigured, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The energy flow. It needs to be balanced, like this. She projected the image into their shared data stream. The Deathworlder scientists studied the configuration, their visors glinting. The energy matrix. It is unstable, Lyra said. It could overload. But it could also work, Anthony countered. It's a risk we have to take. They began working on the modifications, the outpost's lab humming with the combined energy of human ingenuity and Deathworlder precision. As they delved deeper into the weapon's design, they uncovered a hidden function. It could transmit emotions. It was designed to instill fear in our enemies, Lyra explained. A psychological weapon. Anthony's eyes widened. What if we could amplify Celeste's hope? What if we could create a counter-force, a beacon of defiance that could push back against the entity's darkness? Kale's voice crackled over the comm, permeated with warning. Amplifying emotions is unpredictable. It could attract the entity. It could destroy us all. Anthony looked at Celeste, her face pale but determined. He looked at the Deathworlder scientists, their faces hidden but their purpose clear. He looked back at Kale. We have to try, he said, his voice firm. Hope is all we have left. The decision hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. They were about to unleash something they didn't fully understand, something that could save them or destroy them. The fate of humanity and all alien species rested on a fragile thread of hope, amplified by human ingenuity and Deathworlder technology. But the question remained, deep down, if they were making the right choice. With a grunt, Anthony wrestled the last conduit into place, the human tech a stark contrast to the sleek, dark metal of the Deathworlder weapon. All right, Kale, let's see if this Frankenstein holds together. Sparks danced from the newly integrated junction as power cycled through the system. Initial readouts flooded the screen's energy output, spiking far beyond original parameters. It's significant, Kale observed, his voice tight with restrained alarm. But the energy matrix is unstable, wildly fluctuating. Significant is good, Anthony countered, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Unstable, not so much. We'll iron it out. We are exceeding acceptable parameters by a factor of 3, Kale stated flatly. The risk of catastrophic failure is considerable. Perhaps we should revert to the original design. Anthony shook his head, wiping grease from his brow. Original design gets us nowhere. We need the juice. I promise we'll find a way to stabilize it. Celeste stirred, her large, dark eyes widening. A tremor ran through her frame. It feels it, she whispered, her voice strained. The darkness, it notices the energy. A knot formed in Anthony's stomach. How close is it? Closer, she replied, her gaze distant. The spikes. They draw its attention. They gathered around the weapon, a sense of urgency permeating the room. All right, Anthony said, glancing at Celeste. Let's try something. Celeste, you mentioned Ithorian meditation techniques. Could we use that to dampen the energy spikes? Celeste nodded slowly. Perhaps. If we can channel the energy flow, create a harmonic resonance. Hours blurred into a focused dance of minds and technology. Celeste, eyes closed, guided the team, her gentle voice weaving through the hum of the weapon. Human engineering met Ithorian spirituality, a bridge built between two vastly different cultures. Finally, the energy spikes began to subside, the readings smoothing out. "We did it," Anthony breathed, relief washing over him. Cale frowned. "The weapon is stable, but the range, it has been reduced by nearly half." A necessary compromise, Anthony realized, power versus control. "Okay," he said, his mind already racing. "New plan. Celeste, you mentioned this weapon has an emotion-transmitting function, right?" "Yes," she confirmed. "It was intended to project calm, to quell unrest." "What if," Anthony began, a spark of inspiration igniting in his eyes, "we amplify your hope, create a beacon of positive energy, something that pushes back against whatever that thing is?" Cale recoiled. "Amplify emotions? Are you insane? The consequences could be catastrophic. We don't know what that would do." Celeste stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm. "I can control the flow, my connection. It will allow me to guide it." Anthony hesitated, looking from Celeste's determined face to Cale's horrified one. The risks were immense, but the potential reward. "All right," he said, making up his mind. "Let's start with a low-level test. Celeste, focus on hope. We'll transmit it, see what happens." Celeste closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. The weapon hummed, a gentle wave of warmth washing over the room. A noticeable lightness filled the air. A technician looked up from his console, a smile spreading across his face. Even Cale seemed less tense. "Morale is up across the board," a voice reported over the comms. "But we're also getting strange energy fluctuations in the life support systems. Nothing critical yet." Celeste gasped, her eyes snapping open. "It is agitated," she said, her voice trembling. "The darkness. It does not like the hope." Anthony's mind raced. The entity wasn't just consuming energy, it was suppressing emotions. Hope was a direct threat. "We're playing a dangerous game," he muttered. "A game we cannot afford to lose," Cale said grimly. "We are potentially inviting it to attack." Celeste swayed, her hand flying to her head. I see a way," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "To focus it, to concentrate the hope into a beam. But it requires a dangerous modification to the weapon's core." Anthony's gut twisted. Another risk, even greater than before. Was it worth it? Could they trust her vision? He looked at Celeste, at the hope shining in her eyes, and made his decision. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. "We trust you." As they began the delicate process of modifying the weapon's core, the lights flickered. A section of the outpost plunged into darkness. A cold, oppressive presence filled the room, heavier than any vacuum. The entity felt closer than ever. Celeste screamed, clutching her head. "I see it, the outpost. Overwhelmed, nothing, just nothing." Her voice trailed off into a whimper. Her body convulsed and she collapsed, a vision of a dark and terrifying, all-encompassing nothing filling her mind. The overheads flickered violently, plunging the outpost into strobing chaos as emergency lights fought to pierce the gloom. Klaxons blared, a jarring counterpoint to the low, persistent hum that had settled over everything just moments before. The power outage wasn't localized. It was a station-wide hemorrhage. "Report," Anthony barked, already inputting override commands into his console. "What the hell is going on?" "Multiple system failures, Captain," Cale's voice crackled back, strained. "Power grid instability across all sectors. Life support is on auxiliary, but we're bleeding reserves fast." Anthony initiated a diagnostic sweep, the results painting a grim picture. The energy drain was focused, a ravenous pull originating near. "The weapon modification lab," he muttered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Their desperate gamble had backfired. Across the room, Celeste gasped, clutching her head. Her eyes darted around, unfocused, pupils dilated. A sheen of sweat coated her brow. The soft, melodic tones of her native language spilled from her lips, a frantic, unintelligible plea. "It's Clearer now, she choked, her voice barely a whisper. Its voice. In my mind, predatory. The diagnostic sweep finished, the results confirming their worst fears. Captain, Kale reported, his voice tight with urgency. We've got a direct interface attempt. The entity is trying to burrow into our systems through the weapon's core. It's escalating. Kale moved to a console, his fingers flying across the keys. We have to sever the connection, Captain, now, before it takes control of the entire station. His face was grim, cautious approach, immediate defense. Anthony hesitated, his gut twisting. Sever the connection, destroy the weapon, destroy their only chance. We kill it, Kale, he argued, his voice rising. We sever the connection, we might as well vent the whole damn lab into space. It's our only shot. Celeste lurched forward, her breathing ragged. No, severing it. It will only delay it, give it time to prepare, to adapt further. She swayed, her eyes pleading. We have to embrace the risk. Anthony made a split-second decision. Reroute power, non-essential systems only. Life support, comms, minimal lighting. Everything else goes to reinforcing the lab's shielding. Buy us some time. As Kale worked to reroute the power grid, a holographic display flickered to life above the central console. It was fragmented, corrupted, but visible, a partial schematic of the entity. Tendrils of pure energy pulsed within a chaotic matrix, the form both alien and terrifyingly familiar. What is that? Anthony breathed, his gaze fixed on the swirling energy. A vulnerability, Celeste whispered, her voice hoarse, in its energy matrix, but exploiting it, it requires a precise frequency. Her eyes widened in horror. A frequency from my homeworld. From the day it was destroyed. Celeste recoiled, stepping back from the console. I can't, she gasped, her voice thick with pain. I can't go back there, I can't relive it. She wrapped her arms around herself as if warding off a physical blow. It will overwhelm me. Anthony stepped towards her, his voice firm but gentle. Celeste, I know what you're going through, but your strength. Your connection. It's the key to saving countless lives. You have to do this. Celeste stared at him, her eyes filled with fear and grief. After a long, agonizing moment, she nodded slowly. All right, she whispered, her voice trembling. All right, I'll try. She closed her eyes, her breathing slowing, deepening. She entered a deep meditative state, reaching into the darkest corners of her memory, dredging up the horrors she had tried so desperately to bury. As Celeste delved into her past, the entity intensified its attack. The lab shuddered violently, metal groaning under immense pressure. Sparks flew from the consoles, and warning lights flashed with increasing urgency. Cracks spiderwebbed across the reinforced viewport. Shields are failing, Captain, Kale shouted over the din. We can't hold it for much longer. Anthony gripped the edge of the console, his nucleus tightening. Hold the line, Kale, just a little longer. He glanced at Celeste, her face serene despite the chaos around them. He had to buy her time. Finally, Celeste's eyes snapped open. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I have it, she whispered, her voice filled with a power that belied her fragile state. She transmitted the frequency. The weapon resonated with a surge of energy, a blinding flash momentarily eclipsing the emergency lights. The lab vibrated violently, the air crackling with power. The entity recoiled, its presence in Celeste's mind momentarily diminished. The outpost systems flickered, then stabilized. The klaxons fell silent. The emergency lights dimmed, replaced by the soft glow of the restored primary power. But the weapon began to glow with an ominous, pulsating light. Celeste collapsed, her body limp. Anthony caught her before she hit the floor. It knows, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It knows our plan. It's adapting. A new alarm blared to life, overriding all other systems. A distress signal. This time it wasn't Ithorian, it was human. Is under attack, a garbled voice choked through the comms. Cannot hold. Deathworlder. Entity. The signal ended abruptly, replaced by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the outpost, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. The colony's distress signal crackled through the comms, a desperate, fragmented plea cutting through the sterile hum of the outpost. Under attack. Entity consuming. Anthony ran a hand through his thinning hair, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He glanced at Kale, whose expression mirrored his own internal conflict. "We can't send a ship, not with the energy readings spiking like they are," Kale said, his voice tight. "But we can't just ignore them either." "Damn it," Anthony muttered, hitting the console. "Patch a probe, long-range sensors only. Let's see what we're dealing with." Resources were stretched thin enough without this. Minutes later, the probe launched, a tiny spark disappearing into the black. Time stretched, each second an eternity, until the first images flickered onto the main screen. What they saw stole the air from their lungs. The colony, once a vibrant hub of activity, was now a scene of utter devastation. Buildings crumbled as if made of sand, consumed by a swirling vortex of iridescent energy. People, frozen in expressions of terror, were being absorbed into the entity, their forms dissolving into shimmering particles. The probe's feed abruptly cut out. Celeste gasped, clutching her head. It's adapting," she whispered, her voice strained. "It knows. It knows about human ingenuity, our strategic thinking. It's targeting it." Anthony stared at the blank screen, the horrifying images burned into his mind. "We can't let this happen again," he said, his voice hardening with perseverance. "We have that modified disruptor weapon, right? The one we salvaged from the Deathworlder wreck. Let's use it. Localized disruption field. Maybe we can sever its connection, buy them some time." It was a long shot, reckless even, but doing nothing was not an option. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Technicians scrambled to recalibrate the weapon, rerouting power and bypassing safety protocols. Celeste, despite her weakened state, guided them, her knowledge of Deathworlder tech proving invaluable. But as they worked, her mental state deteriorated. She flinched at unseen terrors, her breathing becoming ragged. Finally, the weapon was ready. Anthony initiated the sequence. A beam of pulsating energy shot out, enveloping the colony in a shimmering field. For a moment, the entity seemed to falter, its swirling vortex flickering. Then the feed from the colony re-established. Some colonists, huddled in makeshift shelters, were alive. They bought them time, but the victory was short-lived. Celeste screamed, collapsing to the floor, her body convulsing. "It's attacking my mind." Without hesitation, Anthony turned to Kale. Going in, I have to. Help me interface with her neural link." Kale looked at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't be serious. It's too dangerous. You have no idea what's in there." "I don't care," Anthony replied, his voice firm. "We can't leave her like this." With Kale's reluctant assistance, Anthony connected to Celeste's mind. The world dissolved into a chaotic landscape of fragmented memories and swirling darkness. He saw flashes of Ither, her homeworld, consumed by the entity. He saw the faces of the dying colonists, their terror echoing in his mind. The entity was there too, a malevolent presence twisting Celeste's fears and regrets into weapons. He navigated the treacherous terrain, guided by Celeste's fading consciousness. Then a flicker of light, a hidden memory buried deep within her subconscious. It was a detail about the entity's energy source, a specific type of radiation found only near dying stars. It craved it. It needed it. They pulled back, severing the link. Celeste lay still, pale and weak. Anthony staggered, his head pounding, the entity's presence still lingering in his mind. It needs that radiation," he gasped, relaying the information. "We can lure it in." They had a weakness, a sliver of hope. They spent the next hours scavenging every piece of equipment, every spare part, modifying the outpost into a makeshift trap. They focused the outpost's energy output, creating a concentrated beam of the radiation the entity craved. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. As the energy levels peaked, the entity responded. The swirling vortex of energy, previously distant, began to coalesce, drawn to the signal like a moth to a flame. It approached the outpost, its form becoming more defined, more terrifying. Just as the entity entered the trap, drawn in by the irresistible lure, a ripple appeared in space, and from that ripple they materialized, the Deathworlder fleet, silent, menacing, and their intentions utterly unknown. The comms panel crackled, spitting static before resolving into a crisp, modulated tone. Outpost designated Haven. This is Fleet Command Vessel Nightfall of the Deathworlder. Armada, we request parley. Relief, sharp and unexpected, sliced through Anthony's apprehension. A parley, not annihilation, he swallowed, keying his response. Nightfall, this is Commander Anthony Jackson of Outpost Haven. We acknowledge your request. Stand by. He glanced at Celeste, her Ithorian eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were dancing on the edge of a knife. Well, Anthony said, more to himself than her, that's unexpected. He straightened his uniform, a futile attempt at projecting authority, and strode to the main viewport. A shuttle, sleek and obsidian black, detached from the Nightfall and began its approach. Prepare a secure landing bay, he ordered, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. And someone get me a decent cup of coffee. This could be a long day. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a figure clad in formidable armor, its design both alien and brutally efficient. The Deathworlder commander, its face obscured by a helmet, moved with a fluid grace that belied its size. Two armored guards flanked it, weapons held at the ready. Anthony met them at the foot of the ramp, Celeste a step behind. Commander Jackson, the Deathworlder said, its voice a synthesized rumble. I am, designation, Kale, we have no quarrel with this outpost. Anthony raised an eyebrow. No quarrel, the galaxy is running scared from you. What do you want? Kale tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost human. We seek not conquest, Commander, we seek annihilation, the annihilation of a far greater threat than ourselves. Celeste gasped, a choked sound. Anthony turned to her, questioning. It's true, she whispered, her voice trembling. They're not lying, I can feel it. Kale continued, our fleet's retreat, as you call it, was a calculated maneuver. We lured the entity unknowingly into a region where its influence could be contained, weakened. We believed we had more time, but it has adapted faster than anticipated. Anthony's mind raced. This changed everything. You lured it. Why? Because, Kale said, its voice resonating with an unshakable focus, it is the only way to destroy it. A direct confrontation is futile, it consumes all. Celeste stepped forward, her voice gaining strength. He speaks the truth, I have seen it, the entity. It feeds on energy, on stars, on entire galaxies. Anthony studied Kale, searching for any sign of deception. But he saw only a cold, unwavering purpose. All right, he said, making a decision. I'm listening, what do you need? Intelligence, Kale replied. Technology, collaboration. We will share all that we have. We believe that together we may stand a chance. And so the unlikely alliance began. Data streams flooded the outpost's antiquated systems as the Deathworlders provided detailed analyses of the entity's energy signature, its weaknesses, its patterns of movement. Human scientists, initially wary, dove into the data, their skepticism slowly giving way to awe. Incredible, Dr. Ramirez muttered, his fingers flying across the console. They're energy weapons. They're not based on anything we've ever seen, and this disruption field, it's designed to unravel the entity's core structure. Within hours, they had found a way to amplify the energy disruption field, using a combination of human ingenuity and Deathworlder technology. We can focus the field, increase its range, Ramirez announced, his eyes shining with excitement. We can make it exponentially more effective. As the scientists worked, Celeste remained in a meditative trance, her Ithorian senses reaching out, probing the depths of the entity's consciousness. Suddenly she cried out, clutching her head. Celeste, what is it? Anthony rushed to her side. I saw it, she gasped, her voice strained. Its origin, a region of space, uncharted, far beyond anything we know. The scope of the threat was staggering. This wasn't just about saving a few planets, it was about saving the entire galaxy. Kale approached, its massive form casting a shadow over them. We can offer more. Our cloaking technology. Modified, it can mask this outpost, rendering it invisible to the entity's sensors during the trap. Anthony's mind clicked. Wait a minute. If we can modify your cloaking tech to hide the outpost, could we also use it to amplify and redirect the energy disruption field after it's activated? Focus it like a laser. Kale paused, its synthesized voice taking on a note of surprise. A novel application. It is possible. The collaboration intensified. Technicians worked around the clock, integrating Deathworlder technology into the outpost systems. Sparks flew, wires crossed, and the air crackled with energy as they wrestled with the alien tech. "Damn it," a technician yelled, banging his hand on a console. "This Deathworlder interface is a nightmare. It's like they designed it to be deliberately incompatible." "Try rerouting the power conduit through the auxiliary matrix," Anthony suggested, his own hands greasy with lubricant. "And bypass the primary regulator, it's overheating." "Think you can do better, Commander?" The technician shot back, but he followed Anthony's instructions. A moment later, the system sputtered to life. All right, I stand corrected." As the preparations neared completion, Celeste emerged from her trance, her face pale and drawn. "It's becoming aware," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The entity, it senses our plan, it's adapting." Anthony felt a chill run down his spine. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough," Celeste replied. "It's accelerating its approach." He swore under his breath. They were running out of time. "Kale," he said, turning to the Deathworlder commander. "We need to move up the activation, now." Kale nodded, its decision swift and decisive. "Agreed. Prepare for immediate deployment." Outside, the entity, a swirling vortex of energy and darkness, hurtled towards the outpost, drawn by the faint traces of the disruption field. The Deathworlder fleet, cloaked in shadows, positioned itself to intercept any potential escape routes. Anthony took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation switch. This was it. Everything was on the line. "Activate the trap," he ordered, his voice ringing with perseverance. He slammed his hand down on the switch. The outpost shuddered as the amplified energy disruption field surged to life, bathing the surrounding space in an ethereal glow. The entity screamed, a sound that resonated through the very fabric of space-time. But then, a pulse of raw energy erupted from the entity, a directed blast that slammed directly into the Deathworlder fleet. The lights flickered violently, plunging the command deck into momentary darkness before the emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in a harsh red glow. Alarms blared, a cacophony of klaxons and warning sirens that vibrated through Anthony's bones. The deck bucked beneath his feet. The air crackled with ozone. "Report!" Anthony yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. A junior officer, his face pale, stammered, "Multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, sir, the Deathworlder fleet. They're taking heavy casualties, their shields are collapsing." On the main view screen, the chaotic battle unfolded. Deathworlder cruisers, once menacingly sleek, were now twisted wrecks, their hulls breached and venting atmosphere. Jagged arcs of energy lashed out from the entity, each pulse crippling another vessel. It was an EMP, but far more potent, targeting specific frequencies and alien tech with surgical precision. "Shield integrity at 60%, another voice shouted. "Energy disruption field weakening." Anthony tightened fists. The outpost shields were barely holding, and the energy disruption field, their only real defense, was faltering. He could feel the hum of the shields vibrating through the deck, a strained, desperate song. "Emergency repair teams to decks 4 through 7. Divert auxiliary power to the shields." Anthony barked, his voice tight with urgency. "Get me engineering, now." The comms crackled to life. Engineering to command. We're stretched thin, Chancellor. The damage is extensive and we're running low on repair drones. On the interface, a direct transmission request flashed from the Deathworlder flagship. Anthony hesitated for only a moment before accepting the call. The image of the Deathworlder commander, his face etched with iron will, filled the screen. Chancellor, the commander's voice boomed, distorted slightly by the comms. We are taking heavy casualties. Our shields are failing. We require immediate assistance. Before Anthony could respond, Celeste gasped, clutching her head. Her eyes darted around the room, unfocused and wide with terror. It's adapting, she whispered, her voice strained. I see it, absorbing the energy. From the disruption field, human scientists hunched over consoles in the research bay confirmed Celeste's vision. Chancellor, Dr. Brown's voice came over the comms. The entity is evolving. It's adapting to the disruption field. It's becoming less effective. Anthony's mind raced. They were running out of time. He needed a solution, and he needed it fast. I have an idea, he said, his voice grim. A risky one. We reroute power from the outpost's life support systems to reinforce the shields and the disruption field. A collective gasp filled the command deck. Chancellor, that's insane. A crew member protested. We can't reduce life support. We'll suffocate. It's the only way to buy us some time. Anthony countered, his voice firm. We can't let those shields fail. There has to be another way, said the same crew member. Celeste stepped forward, her eyes filled with a strange, unsettling light. I can try to connect with it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. To understand it, to find a weakness. Connect with it. Anthony stared at her, incredulous. Celeste, that's suicide. You don't know what that thing is capable of. It is a risk I am willing to take, Celeste replied, her voice resolute. It may be the only chance we have. Anthony hesitated, torn. He knew the risks, but he also knew that Celeste's unique connection to the entity might be their only hope. All right, he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. But we do this my way. Dr. Brown, prepare a neural interface. We'll monitor her vitals every second. Celeste nodded, closing her eyes. As she entered the meditative state, her body began to tremble. Images flashed across her mind, chaotic swirls of energy, the screams of dying stars, the cold, empty void between galaxies. She was drowning in a sea of sensations, her mind struggling to make sense of the alien consciousness. On the bridge, the Deathworlder commander watched the proceedings with open skepticism. Humans, he growled, his voice infused with disdain. Always with the mystical rituals. Do you truly believe this? Connection will yield results. Anthony glared at the commander, his patience wearing thin. We're trying to save your fleet, Commander, he snapped. Maybe you should focus on that instead of questioning our methods. Within her vision, Celeste stumbled upon something new, a pattern amidst the chaos. The entity was drawn to emotion. Intense, raw emotion. It was like a beacon guiding it through the darkness. Anthony's eyes widened as understanding dawned. It's drawn to emotional energy, he said, his voice hushed with awe. Intense feelings. That's its weakness. We can use that, Celeste said, her voice weak but clear as she emerged from the meditative state. We can lure it into a trap. Just then, a secondary pulse slammed into the outpost, knocking out the primary sensors. The command deck plunged into darkness, the emergency lights flickering erratically. A wave of disorientation washed over Anthony. Sensors are down, a voice shrieked. We're blind. Celeste, weakened but resolute, spoke. We can broadcast a signal filled with artificial emotional energy. It will be drawn to it. We will need a Deathworlder emitter. The Deathworlder commander hesitated, his face a mask of suspicion. And what is the condition of this emitter? I am not willing to risk the lives of my crew without a guarantee. The emitter will be fine, but you will let us lead the attack, Anthony said. The commander's eyes narrowed. A human leading Deathworlders, unacceptable. We lead the attack. As they prepared to implement the plan, a massive surge of energy emanated from the entity. a palpable wave of power that shook the entire outpost. The lights flickered one last time, threatening to fail completely. It was coming. The entity's energy surged, a palpable wave that slammed against the outpost's shields. Consoles sparked, alarms blared a discordant symphony of impending doom, and the deck vibrated violently underfoot. Even the artificial gravity seemed to waver. The Deathworlder commander, a hulking figure clad in obsidian armor, hesitated beside the modified emitter. This station is compromised. Its energy reserves are depleted. This plan is risky. Anthony ignored him, fingers flying across the console, rerouting the last dregs of the outpost's emergency power. Risky is our baseline, pal. Now, are you going to help me fry this thing, or are you going to stand there and admire the pretty lights? He bypassed safety protocols, the air crackling with ozone. Almost there. Celeste, eyes glazed, swayed slightly, her breathing shallow. Sweat beaded on her brow as she fought to maintain her connection to the entity. Left. Adjust the focusing array. Slightly more. Humanity. Her voice was a strained whisper, imbued with pain. The emitter, a Frankensteinian amalgamation of Deathworlder technology and human ingenuity, hummed with impossibly strong power. A focused beam of raw energy, interwoven with a disruptive frequency based on Anthony's understanding of waveform collapse, lanced out, striking the entity. A visible shudder ran through the entity's form, a shimmering distortion in the fabric of space itself. It retaliated with a pulse of pure energy, even more potent than before. The outpost groaned, shields flickering and threatening to collapse. Red lights strobed, casting long, dancing shadows. Then something unexpected. The entity shifted its focus, ignoring the station and zeroing in on the emitter. It feels the frequency, Celeste gasped, her eyes widening. It's drawn to it. The human element. It's a weakness. Refocus the emitter, Anthony barked, recalibrating the energy disruption field. Amplify the signal, Celeste, tell them how. He worked feverishly, lines of code scrolling across his screen. We destabilize it, we weaken it. Enough for you to finish it. The Deathworlders, their movements precise and efficient, adjusted the emitter's targeting. Anthony banged his head on the activation rune, channeling the full force of the disruption field. The beam intensified, the air around it shimmering with chaotic energy. The entity convulsed, its form flickering erratically. The disruption field was tearing it apart, destabilizing its core essence. It was vulnerable. Celeste, despite the agony etched on her face, pushed through the pain. One last modification, Deathworlder tech. Amplify the beam at a quantum level to resonate with the chaos. It will spread throughout. The Deathworlders, without hesitation, implemented Celeste's modification. The emitter pulsed, unleashing a final, amplified beam of emotional and chaotic energy. The entity emitted a deafening, mind-shattering scream, a sound that clawed at the edges of sanity. Then, silence. The entity dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint, lingering energy signature, a ghostly echo in the void. The alarms slowly died, replaced by the groaning of stressed metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. The Deathworlder commander turned to Anthony, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. Human, your understanding was critical. A flicker of something akin to respect flashed in his voice. Your ingenuity saved us. The outpost was a wreck. Sections were breached, life support failing, and the casualty reports were grim. The cost of victory was high. Anthony and Celeste stood together on the command deck, overlooking the ravaged landscape. The stars twinkled coldly through gaping holes in the hull. Celeste turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness but also with a newfound perseverance. It's gone, Anthony. It will never come back. She paused, looking out at the vastness